Ladies and gentlemen, our next act is Michael Musika.
Don't blow it, Jerome. It's a surprise. It's okay. It doesn't matter. I don't want to talk about this afterwards. Seriously. And I was gonna do a joke because it's kind of heavy, my story. So just so y'all know, I don't take myself seriously. It was about a text message conversation I had with somebody called Jesse Woolitz. Maybe I'm not gonna do that. I think. Yeah, something told me not to. So instead, I'm going to just tell you this. It's really out of context, but it'll make slightly more sense when this is over. That when I was 5, I moved to Massachusetts from... Yeah. I moved to Sudbury, Massachusetts from Orange County, and when it was time for the first day of school, my parents were like, yeah, you don't want to wait at the bus stop by yourself. There's 2 girls waiting up the street. You should go there. So my mom dropped me off, and I was like, yes, babes. And they were both really pretty, you know, and they looked nice enough. And one of them kind of looked like a little fortune teller. The other one was like a little hustler kind of thing. I was excited, but it turned out that it was like a weird fight club. They would just kick my ass every day. No, it's not awe. It was fun. Okay. Part 1, October 12th, The Universe. My dad has really bad cancer, and I'm a terrible lover. I was back home where I grew up in Maryland recently, and my mom was all, you're going to have to seek professional therapy for this. This is going to be a very difficult time. I said, Mom, you know how I feel about therapists and astrologers and all that fortune-telling bullshit. She said, Michael, you talk about all the time how you haven't cried for 14 years. You know I love you, but let's admit you're a little bit emotionally retarded. You need to ask for help. I said, Mom, don't worry, I got this. I'm going to work out my problems through some comedy storytelling at the Vanessa Verlee variety show on November 3rd. She said, Michael, you're so full of shit. You're a musician, not a stand-up comedian storyteller. I said, no, man, I'm serious. She said, okay. November 3rd is coming up soon. A real stand-up comedian already has his material in place, I would imagine. What's the name of your first bit? My dad has really bad cancer, and I'm a terrible lover. Michael, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're not going to heal by making an ass out of yourself in front of strangers. What's more, your father does not want to be remembered as a sick person. At this point, my father, who'd been lying in pain next to us on the couch for the duration of the argument, spoke up in an uncharacteristically defeated voice. He can do it, Sherry. I've wasted my life trying to prove other people wrong, and now it's over. That's funny. Then I started to get mad, because this person who my whole life filled me up with absurd confidence and never say die mentality was giving up. I've been asking him for weeks to wake up and love the world and realize he's an extraordinary person, and I got nowhere. See? This is what I'm talking about. Y'all aren't going to listen to me, so I'm taking my message to the Lord. I don't perform for strangers, man. I perform for the Lord, yo. Michael, my mother said, is it supposed to come as consolation that you will be embarrassing us in front of the Lord in addition to an intimate crowd of postgraduate hipsters? Oh my God, I said, when have I ever embarrassed you? Well, since I'm not a Hindu goddess with an abacus in every hand, I can't give you an accurate statistic at the moment. Besides, she continued, you don't believe in God anyway. Don't you remember when you hated going to Sunday school and you went on barefoot strike and mailed your shoes to the address on the Sally Struthers commercial? Then both her and my father started laughing, and I grabbed my shirt and went like this. See, I am funny. Y'all gonna feel it one way or the other. And I do believe in God. Jesus walked in the wilderness, not in some fluorescently lighted cultural Kool-Aid daycare service. All right then, Michael, she said, no longer laughing. Then honor thy father. Part 2, October 2012, San Francisco, California. Alice the Frenchie and Princess Frou Frou Lala. Although I was a difficult child, I did often follow my parents' advice and still do. My mother told me to talk to a professional. And so, when I returned to San Francisco, I called up my friend Alice. She's not a therapist per se. She's a French lawyer working in America who goes to Burning Man. Accordingly, her bilingual, rigorously educated, rational mind also has room for the intellectual irresponsibility of New Age bacchanalianism, mysticism, masquerading as soul-searching. That to me seemed like a tidy enough analogy for what constitutes a psychologist in today's society. So with my mother's advice in mind, I went to see Alice. I told her that my dad had really bad cancer and I'm a terrible lover. And Alice is a very beautiful lady, and she looked me right in the eye when she gave me her therapeutical advice, and so I'm a little suspicious of how profound it seemed to me. Nonetheless, her words affected me very deeply. She said, "Michael, whether you are trying to help your father or being a lover, you cannot go into the situation feeling as if you're responsible for the other person's experience. You are alive. There is pleasure and there is pain. It is not in your capability to create or fix it. Cast away your shame at succumbing to these feelings and be there when they happen. If you are able to do this fully, everyone will be better off." Yeah. "You're very wise, Alice," I replied, and we toasted glasses and had a very nice evening. I went home late that night and stayed up later, pacing around my house, puzzling over Alice's words. The next morning I had to wake up early for my job as substitute for Fargon Elementary. On this day, my assignment was to take Miss Brayer's third grade class to a field trip to the children's garden in the Golden Gate Park. I arrived to school extremely sleep-deprived and hungover. It was a hot day, and I had to walk Miss Brayer's third graders a mile or so from the school to the garden in the park. My head hurt, and the spring in my step was more like a slinky. I had to hold my balls in order to make lateral movements. I was miserable. So I started to think about Alice's advice, which I had condensed at this point to mean, just fully enjoy yourself and forget about the consequences. Shortly after coming to this realization, Zufei Zhao, who I call by the nickname Zuzu, asked me, "Mr. Musika, what's your real name?" I said, "Michael Musika, what are you talking about, Zuzu?" She said, "No way, you say Musika because you like music." "Zuzu, that's my real name, man," I said. "I'm not a man," she said. "Whatever, yo," I replied, prepared to drop the subject. "What's your middle name, then?" asked Zuzu. "Princess Frou Frou Lala," I responded with a lightning strike of genius. Zuzu laughed. "No, it's not." "Yeah, it is, man. Why you gotta argue all the time?" "Can we call you that?" "You have to." Zuzu then turned on her heels and excitedly ran to and fro telling all the other children that my name was Princess Frou Frou Lala. I anticipated that this was going to be a problem, so as we crossed a crowded thoroughfare and entered a forest, I decided to circumvent the situation. "Hush, children. Yes, it is I, the great Princess Frou Frou Lala. I cannot hide it any longer. For this is Frou Frou Lala Forest. Anywhere left in the world that is still wild is the land of Frou Frou Lala. The creatures here know her name. And if you are with her, you will always be safe, so long as there is truth in your hearts, laughter in your spirits, and gentleness in your step. Also, do not complain about the hot weather. Drink water and enjoy it. The princess does not like wusses. Let us go forth and have the greatest day the forest has ever known. Princess Frou Frou Lala has spoken. Let it be done." Yeah. The children laughed uproariously and followed me kindly in a pleasant trance the rest of the way to the Arboretum. When we arrived there, we were greeted by a moment of truth. The garden teacher came to greet us and told me her name was Miss Gretchen. She was an earnest-looking Native American young woman who had a bearing of integrity. Miss Gretchen smiled at the children, but not at me. "What is your name?" she said. A hush came over the children, and they balled their little fists in anticipation. I watched them for a moment with a mysterious expression on my face. Then I turned to Miss Gretchen. "I am Frou-Frou Lala. Princess Frou-Frou Lala." The children all laughed, and Miss Gretchen did not. On the contrary, she seemed rather put off. All the same, we followed her into the children's garden and did a great job on the field trip. The kids did carefully rendered illustrations of flowering plants and gently collected insects to put in the compost pile. They took their lunch in complete silence, at Miss Gretchen's request, so we could listen to the sounds of birds and red-legged frogs. When it was time to leave, Miss Gretchen thanked the children for being wonderful gardeners and asked if we had any questions. I quickly raised my hand, and Miss Gretchen begrudgingly called on me. "What's that for?" I asked, pointing at what looked like a giant decapitated crucifix made of PVC pipe, with grip tape wound meticulously around the place to strap the outstretched arms. "It's a hawk perch," Miss Gretchen answered, sighing sadly in resignation. "I built it over a year ago, but no hawk has ever come." Now, I'm not making this up. I'm really not making this up. A moment later, I saw a hawk circling overhead. I signaled for the class to keep quiet. Then I pointed out the hawk and gently whispered, "Look." And slowly the hawk descended and landed on the PVC crucifix. And for a magical minute that seemed like a month, the hawk watched us and we watched the hawk. Then it flapped its wings and returned to the sky. Then I said, "Come, children. Frou-Frou Lala's work is done here." Say thank you to Miss Gretchen and proceed with care. On the way home, we ran through the sprinklers, and the heat dried our clothes by the time we got back to school and were really tired. And we got upstairs, and I congregated the children on the community rug to get ready to go home. And I said, "Yo, you dare me to text Miss Brer and tell her the class was excellent today. Thank you for letting me teach. Your friend, Princess Frou-Frou Lala." "Yeah," they all shouted. I texted Miss Brer as I was dared to and received a very prompt reply. I then handed my phone to an incredulous Zhu Feizhao, who read it to the class. "You are truly wonderful. Thank you, Your Highness." Thank you guys so much. I tried to speed it up so it's time to go home. Childhood, Maryland, basketball and baseball. I learned how to teach from my father, which is to say I learned how to play. He was born in a town called Coatesville, but it was a rough town, and he got in lots of trouble and got sent to military school when he was in the 7th grade. He was good at sports there and got into the University of Indiana based partially on that and because his uncle was a football star there some 15 years prior. As a freshman at Indiana, he beat the best sprinter on the track team in a race during physical education class. The coach heard about it, and my father was asked to try out for the track team. He did so, and by the end of his freshman year had earned a scholarship. By the time he was a senior, he was a team captain and anchored a 4x400 relay team that set a world record in an indoor meet. This is politically incorrect, but he used to always tell us he was the fastest white man in history. He qualified for the Olympic trials in the 1972 Munich Games. He finished 5th, but did not make the team, but continued to run for a semi-pro running club sponsored by Adidas. It was called the Pacific Coast Club, and they would compete against college teams and professional clubs in Europe where track and field was still very popular. It was in this capacity that he met my mother, and she went on one of those trips with him and got disowned because my grandparents thought he was a con man. I gotta do some editing on the fly here. When I was 6 or so, he taught me to dribble and shoot a basketball, partially because he just wanted to play with someone, I think. I thought I was learning pretty quick. I practiced every day while he was at work. I remember one day he came home and I was super proud to show him my progress. We went out in the driveway and I drove on him, and when I went up for a shot, he swatted the ball into the 5th row of the forest that grew around the court. "You can't telegraph that shit, homie," he shouted, tugging at his shirt like this. "Coatesville, baby. I'm gonna block that shit every time. You need to learn some subterfuge." I got really angry. "What are you talking about, Coatesville? I'm 5 years old, motherfucker." He kept swatting my shots, and I kept shooting, furious, but not wanting to stop. He seemed bewildered by how hard it was for me, and by how much I seemed to care. It took me years before I could beat him at basketball. The first thing I ever did get the better out of him at was at baseball. I was probably around 11 years old, and it was early March in Maryland and icy cold. We'd walk with a bucket full of baseballs down the hill from our house and use this embankment for a backstop. He'd be pitching from the center of a big field of grass. I remember looking over his shoulder and imagining the big trees of the forest in the distance was the grandstands of a stadium. But for the first 2 weeks of March, I couldn't hit for shit. He'd throw a whole bucket of 21 balls, and I'd miss almost all of them, or roll a few weak ground balls, which hurt my hands because it was cold out, and I'd be enraged. And my dad'd be all, "Anger's not going to solve your problems, man. This world doesn't owe you any respect. Learn the game, and respect will come." And I'd be swinging and missing or stinging my hands on shitty ground balls, and I would walk back up the hill every day in a very black mood. I hated being a failure, and I could tell my father was sad that his son didn't measure up. One day, though, I can't explain it, I woke up in the morning and I knew how to hit a baseball. At breakfast, I asked my dad if he wanted to play. He seemed unsure. "I don't want to keep doing it if you're going to get mad and won't listen." "I won't get mad," I replied. "I remember everything you said. I know how to do it now." He looked at me funny and left the table. I followed him. He carried the bucket of balls down the hill. He set up on the pretend pitching mound in the grass with the forest grandstands in the distance. I stood at the imaginary plate with the embankment for a backstop. He threw the first pitch and I missed it. Then I stepped out, took a deep breath, and stretched my arms over my head.
Yeah.
Then I stepped back in. Neither of us said anything. He threw another pitch and I crushed it 10 times further than I'd ever hit a baseball. I can still remember the glorious sight of it sailing high over my father's head and crashing with an echoing smack into the canopy of the forest, still bare and leafless from winter. A flock of crows resting in the branches scattered squawking into the air. He threw another pitch and again I drove it into the forest. Now I've set myself up here as the innocent sort of hero of this tale to some degree, but that simply isn't true. I was an insufferable little fucker the moment I felt the upper hand. And I started getting this swagger on. And I hit all the rest of the balls into the forest until finally he got the 21st one out of the bucket. He's like, "This is the last ball." And he looked at it quizzically like there was something written between the stitching. "You think you're going to hit it?" "I know I'm going to hit it. No way you get it by me," I said. He wound up real elaborate, like Satchel Paige. And he threw it right at my head. I had to do some ninja shit to get out the way. I was like, "What the fuck was that? I didn't hit you with the ball. Daniel Boone got hit by my balls, man." In Coatesville, he said, "That's a sign of respect." Let's see how I'm going to finish this fast. I got real good at baseball real fast. I tore it up on the local rec league circuit, but I wasn't the best player in town. The best player, far and away, was Brendan McKinney. His little brother Ryan, who we called the Fat Man, was really good too. An incredible natural talent, but he was too lackadaisical to be as good as Brendan. All three of us became best friends. We was always on the same baseball, basketball, and soccer teams every year. Brendan and Ryan was raised mainly by a single mom named Peggy McKinney. This is worth mentioning because they didn't call her mom. They called her Peggy McKinney. "Peggy McKinney," Brendan would ask, "can me and the Fat Man stay over Musikas after baseball?" "Yes, Brendan," she would say. "Behave yourselves." So my dad would drive all three of us home from games pretty often. If the fat man made a flaky blunder during the game, we used to make him ride home in the trunk. But if he played good, we let him ride shotgun, and he'd get my dad to tell us a Woody Guthrie story. They was called Woody Guthrie stories because my dad would tell them in the third person and refer to himself as Woody Guthrie. This was because my mom and Peggy McKinney knew we looked up to my dad and feared if we heard all the scandalous shit Woody Guthrie had been up to, we'd turn out to be criminals. The fat man's favorite Woody Guthrie stories were the hitchhiking tales, of which were there many, and the best of the hitchhiking stories was called Woody Rises from the Grave. In Woody Rises from the Grave, Woody and his friend Bob got challenged by his cousin Paul and Paul's friend Jim to a hitchhiking race across the country. All four men started in California with no more than 25 cents in their pockets. And the lead changed hands many times, perhaps almost as often as the scenery, until finally they arrived just outside of the town of Coatesville, and Woody Guthrie was trailing cousin Paul and Jim by at least a half an hour, and there was a parade on the only road into town. And Bob was all, "We're fucked, Woody Guthrie." Woody Guthrie's like, "No way." And right when he said that, a hearse came by, and he stuck out his thumb, and the hearse stopped. And they explained the situation to the driver of the hearse. It was a cool dude. And he's like, "Just get in the back." And he gave them both flowers. And the hearse, he put on the headlights of the hearse like it was a funeral, and they drove past the whole parade. And they got in town, and they were looking out the windows, and they saw cousin Paul and Jim, and like, "Holy shit!" He started pounding on the windows. And then when they saw Paul and Jim looking at the hearse, they ducked down again. And the driver was real cool. He stopped the car, and he started talking to Paul and Jim. He's like, "Yeah, man, you gotta see what's in the back of here." And the agreement of the race, the hitchhiking race, is the first people to get to the clock tower wins. And so they open up the doors to the back, and Bob and Woody Guthrie jump out the coffin. They're like, "Boom, motherfucker!" And they flowers. And then they ran and won the race. And he always pointed out that Woody Guthrie was a super fast runner. Paul couldn't catch him. You see, my father would say, in the way that he resolves all of these stories, most people don't use more than 10% of their potential, fat man. Woody Guthrie hitchhiked clear across the country 25 times and never had more than 5 nickels in his pocket. People can do anything if they're not afraid. Okay, I'm almost done. If I keep editing on the fly, I think I'll be under my quotas of times. I'm still on Alice the Frenchie's advice. I'm being selfish. Thank you for being kind. Okay, this is called Iverson versus Carter. It's from spring 2001. I love Allen Iverson. We grew up in the same part of the country, and he's just a couple years older than me, so I've been following him ever since we were both in high school. Many years later, I moved to San Francisco. I was very lonely. I lived in a little room with a mattress on a loft, and I had a little TV. 2001 was the defining year of Iverson's career. He won the league MVP that year, and after what had been a troubled beginning. Watching his run through the NBA playoffs with the Philadelphia 76ers was the thing I'd look forward to every night after long, rainy San Francisco days working for a landscaping company. I'd put on my PJs and climb up the ladder to my loft and put the Iverson game on and forget all my friends was far away and whatever other troubles and sadnesses I had. As the season wore on and the games got bigger, the TV sideline reporter, whose job was to set the scene, got more and more grandiose in his portrayal of Allen as a petulant thug. They'd do the stupid Ken Burns effect pans of a photograph taken for XXL magazine or some shit like this. And the camera would go from the scowl on Allen's face, real slow-mo over all his tattoos. And the reporter would be narrating like, selfish, dangerous, volatile, tardy, street, playground, hip-hop generation. And the person delivering this opinion is this privileged, smirking, out-of-shape, condescending, reductionist, middle-aged frat dude. Before one game in the conference semifinals, the reporter did this piece comparing Allen to Vince Carter, who was the star player of the opposing Toronto Raptors. Vince had traveled to the University of North Carolina one morning during the series to take part in cap and gown ceremonies. They showed him in his cap and gown, and then they flashed the picture of Allen from XXL. And reporter was all, "Who's it going to be, America? The dangerous nigger or Uncle Tom's balls?" It wasn't a fair or accurate portrayal of either player, what they represented, their talent, and all they had accomplished. It was just disrespectful to everyone, and I wanted to kill that dude. So the game starts, and Toronto takes an early lead, and they're talking about how Allen played shitty the game before and how he's selfish and stuff like this. Then Dikembe Mutombo, the 76ers center, can't hold on to an offensive rebound, and Antonio Davis of the Raptors grabs the ball, and he throws an outlet pass to half court. And the guard was there to receive it, but then you see this little teeny tiny skinny arm, and a blur goes by, and Allen steals the ball, and he's the fastest dude you'll ever see. He races down the ball, and he's by everyone, and the only one left in his way is Vince Carter. And Allen doesn't even look at him. He just takes flight. Now bear in mind, he's like this big. It's a little bit bigger than me. And he just jumped over Carter, man. His balls had an aerial view of Carter's skull. And he windmill dunked the ball, and he landed like a wild animal. And all the people in the crowd was throwing popcorn and hot dogs up in the air, and little kids was punching their mom in the face. And people were crying. It was bedlam. So Toronto calls a timeout, and they cut to commercial break. And they do a slow motion shot of Iverson running down the court after he dunked the ball, and he runs by that reporter. And slow motion, he goes. So I called up my dad, and he answered in like half a ring. I said, "Oh my God, did you see that shit? I love the earth!" My dad was emotional too, but in a more refined kind of way. He said, I know. We won't see the likes of Iverson again in our lifetimes. He's brilliant." And I said, "I know. Did you see he did your Coatesville thing to that sideline reporter?" "I did see that." "What do you think it means?" "I think it means that reporter is a bitch," I said. Michael, my father, replied, "Why are you so angry? You should listen to yourself sometime. I don't think Allen did that for the reporter's eyes at all. One day when you're older, you'll understand." All right, I promise the last one. It's called, I don't want to give it away. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Vanessa, and everyone that performed, and everyone that's here. A lot of really special people to me. Okay, late in August, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. I was smoking and drinking a lot, and normally I'm a pretty healthy person. Not these days. One summer's evening, I was drinking lots of beer and smoking lots of cigarettes in my garden behind my house, and this hummingbird came down and started fluttering in my face. I shooed it away, drunkenly, but it kept fluttering in my face. Aggravated, I got up and left through the bamboo gate and walked down to the ocean. And there was dolphins in the water, and little kids was flying kites, and surfers was pointing at the horizon, and pelicans was flying by overhead. And I just walked by like a monster. I walked up the hill past the cliff house, and I got into the Lincoln Park. It's a beautiful bunch of cypress trees on a cliff over above the bay, and there was all these little raccoon family, like a cartoon totem pole, all like looking at me, and I was like, they scattered into the bushes, and I staggered along, stupid everything. And I sat down, and I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you acting like this? And I covered my face. And after a long period of time, I felt like somebody was watching me. And the sun had went down, and nobody was around, you know. And I looked up and there was a coyote standing like right by the piano. And it picked up its paw like this. And I turned around to face the coyote. I didn't say nothing. And it came closer to me. I still didn't say anything. And it came like right in front of me. I was kneeling on the ground and started pawing the ground right in front of me. I felt his breath on my face. It looked right in my eyes. And I started to cry, man. It was weird. And I was all embarrassed, you know? I was like, man, fuck you, coyote. Think you can make me cry? Nature's all timeless and shit. Fuck, man. I got really angry, and I staggered away. I staggered up the hill, and I was thinking about it. I was like, this is so weird. You know, never been able to like cry. And they weren't just like drugstore Indian tears. It was like, seriously, 14 years, like heartbroken, like all kinds of just like put your effort in everything and fail and all this stuff that happens to people dying, you never cry. And then this little ragged little animal looked me in the eye. I was crying. I was like, so weird, man. And so I stopped walking when all that process in my mind. I came to that realization. I was like, man, I wonder if that coyote's still looking. And I turned around, and the coyote was still looking. And he went like this.